the coach cannot live without the tactics board, and you cannot live without your computer. That's how we ended before we pressed record.
Yeah.
So you cannot live without a computer anymore, I think.
No, it's. I think you would say that the computer is my tactics board. So yeah, it's. I mean, come on to it later a little bit, but one of the main things that I got told when I first started in analysis, when I came as a young analyst in the academy, was the screen is the grass. Players can't. Can't train all the time anymore. Physically, it's not good for them. It's obviously they love to train and play, but they can't. So the screen has to become the grass. So we use that as much as possible, whether it's video and feedback or animations or show certain things, certain images, best practice. So for me, I think it has to be the computer. I think without that, I think they probably tear my contract up. So
yeah, so an analyst without a computer. It's interesting almost how the analysts. Or were there even analysts before computers? You had maybe a pen and paper. Did you see that era that you analyze things with pen and paper, or was it always a computer already for you?
There was parts of it that were notation analysis, they used to get called, but it was developing quite rapidly, and I think there's been evidence that people have been doing it but didn't realize they were analyzing. But I remember some funny days of, for example, we didn't have things like Y-Scout and Instat and the databases for each league where you get given the video. So I remember the days of you had to try and record every single highlights reel of every single game in the league that might be an hour long instead of 90 minutes, and then try and take them off a box or whatever it may be. So those were fun days, but it's the same thing. Is however you look at it, and even scouts taking notes at games in a way is a form of analysis. And it's something we try and feed back a lot to, and have tried to pass on. Is you don't need fancy resources all the time to be an analyst. You can sometimes the most creative analysts are the ones that have less resource, so have to make the most of what they've got, whether it's a playlist in QuickTime or VLC, and add in some small drawings over the top in PowerPoint or Keynote. It's still analysis. So I think there's so many different ways. Analysis is a never-ending world, and obviously much closer to the coaching world, I think, now. So
yeah, I can imagine. Is there any maybe out of the box analysis that surprised you lately? Some guy with the pen and paper or whatever, or maybe he challenged you or surprised you with something that you thought, hey, I've never seen it like this?
The one interesting one that comes up a lot in regards to how much detail you go into and right and wrong way is actually with goalkeepers. And then and a funny one that comes up a lot is people talk about details that goalkeepers get now for penalties. And it's quite interesting that you can do research after research, but then found out that, and I've had players that have asked the same. Sometimes you get the penalty taker is asking for detail on where the goalkeeper normally dives on a different type of penalty. So if the goalkeeper is looking at where the striker puts the ball and the striker is looking at where the goalkeeper is diving, at what point does the correlation move?
Who breaks first?
So there's interesting ones with that and different ways of doing it, looking at also in terms of how you do diagrams, for example, things like on a tactics board now, is it better to do it digitally or is it better the old school way of feeling? Is it better to have the players on the tactics board that are you can see the orientation of the body so you can coach them? So there's so many questions you can ask, and I think a lot of it comes down to coach preference. Excuse me.
You mean from the player, which way he is coached the best? So that's what you mean with coach preference,
Yeah, an individual, because the coach may have a certain preference to coach in a certain way, and analysts may have a certain way in which they work. But actually, that's useless unless you know it gets through to the player. So they're questions that we ask a lot. Actually, it comes up a lot in terms of different methods. That we try to make sure that we are adaptable as well, as much as the players are adaptable to systems and formations. We have to be to the player so we can get that message across.
Yeah. So do you, when you have a group of players, you have, I think, a reasonable, a group that is pretty much the same, maybe 4 or 5 players each time that they come with you are different because of the selection or of the squad that differs a little bit. But then now, I think, okay, which player benefits the most from a 1v1 conversation or a group session, or maybe looking at the pictures himself or whatever. You kind of know now, I guess. How did you start with this? Because at one point, do you have them fill out a questionnaire? Do you sit down with them? Okay, what do you like the most? Do you want to do it one by one, or what do you want to do? How does this process start for you?
I think the first thing was relationships. Is building those. If I think back to our first camp with the national team now, where we knew the players because you've watched them, you've seen them, you've seen video of them, you've spoken to people that work in the clubs, and we knew them, but you don't know them. So we tried to be quite open and build relationships where they felt that they enjoyed the environment first. If we felt they enjoyed the environment, then they would be more open. And we've done various things now. So we have, obviously, we have normal team meetings, tactical meetings. We have individual ones. We have really relaxed environment. And we have 2 things that probably we use a lot. The first one is I have a rule for myself that if we're on camp, I'm not in my room. So unless it's sleeping and unless it's going to bed at night, the rest of the time I'm in the canteen, the meeting room, the eating area, the training pitch, in the filming positions if we need tactical, obviously. But you're around, because if a player walks through to get a coffee, they might go, "Oh, by the way, Andy, what about this, and this?" And it builds. So that's one.
There's no boundary, literally, of a door that they have to knock on. They can literally see you there. And sometimes maybe the whole group is watching. Maybe I'm not going to do it now, but everybody's off to the room. I know he's there. I'm going to go now. Maybe those processes are there as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly, and it's being available. And we have another one that we do, and it's alongside our assistant coach, Brede Hangeland, that we have a thing called Coffee Club, and it's 1 or 2 nights before the game, and we have a big football pitch on the floor. People talk about Sabutio, but we tape a huge one out in the meeting room, and we just use coffee cups with it. And the idea is we don't tell the players that that you have to come. We make it so it's optional, but if we built the relationships right, they would want to come because they think, actually, I need to know about this, or I wonder what they think of this. And it might be when, for example, if we're playing on a Thursday, it might be there's a game on the Wednesday night, or it might be that another day. So it might be that we're just taking a coffee watching the game, and they know that we're there for 1 hour and a half, 2 hours, and the players can just pop in, watch 20 minutes of the game, see other teams play, but also can ask, by the way, on the principles of this, what if they do this, what should we do here? And we can give them that small thing, and it's the idea of making it open, relaxed. They can come and ask, and so they have the head coach communication in meetings and in the training sessions, and then they also have little bits of input from us as assistants and coaching and analysis staff. So the idea being it's a really enjoyable football environment. I think that's what we tried to get, and that's how we build those relationships. And I think you can see it develop a little bit over the time, the past year.
It would be interesting to see how that developed over time, because I can imagine, okay, you were there with your staff. Maybe somebody comes up with the idea. Okay, let's create something that is informal, and then it's how I see it. The players, they see you guys sitting there. Should we go in or not? What do we do? And then some guys are probably, I don't need this. I know everything. Some guys, maybe they want to come a little bit closer to the coach because they never know, it maybe could be important later. They're the first one to step in. And then it's so interesting to see that process with players, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Even apart from the content that you're sharing or the things that you're sharing, the whole social dynamics around it are very interesting as well.
Yeah, and it is, and whether some of them come in small groups and they're friendship groups, or they come in just individually, or actually they might come in as a big whole group. Sometimes it's because they want to watch the game, for example, whether it's the Champions League final or Italy Spain in a Nations League game or whatever it may be. So we've had that, and the other part to it has been we make sure that the computer, the non-negotiable, is always connected to the screen in that room, because then what we've had happen a couple of times is players will go, "Oh, do you remember the clip from the team meeting? Can we just put that back on? And so I need to see it again and focus on my bit." We use animations and things for that, but so the idea that they have the pitch, they have the screen, they have the one-to-one conversation. So we try to make sure that every angle they might learn, if they need it, it's there, ready to go. Great. Yeah. As you said, some players like it, some players need it, some players want it, some players are scared to ask, but it's trying to make sure that any of those are hit, really, available.
The atmosphere is that it's okay. You have your time on the pitch, which is holy, of course. There's nothing that's gonna interfere with that. And then around it, you have, of course, you have your physical time. They have their preparations with the physios, and this is almost the same. The physio staff is always there if they need some massage or treatment or whatever, and there's always a tactical treatment, let's call it like that, always possible as well. That's great. Do you ever sleep during those camps? Because I can imagine you have to be available and you have to do your preparation, because you have the players and you also have a coach that needs some information, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's the camps are quite intensive, so it's you have no real time between, because I mean, as an example,
but by the way, your mic is a little bit going against your sweater.
Is better now?
Yeah. So, but if you move a little, then you hear the sound. Yeah, now it's better.
Apologies. Yeah. So we've actually had 2 of our qualification campaigns so far. Our camps we were to meet up on the Sunday night. We actually were due to play on the Wednesday. Now it still feels like if you say that, you have 2 days between. The problem being a lot of the players have played on the Sunday, so they're actually on recovery day 1 on the Monday and recovery day 2 on the Tuesday, and then we might be playing in Montenegro, for example, on the Wednesday.
So you have to travel.
So there's travel. There's no real full training session. You've got maybe 15-20 minutes tactical on the Tuesday. So
session, you mean on the pitch?
Yeah, on the grass.
Yeah.
So you very little time between that, and that was the big difference we saw in the change between 2-game camps and 3 games with national teams, with obviously what happened with trying to fit the schedule in.
Yeah.
So with that, it became more intensive, because then we had to make sure content was ready for when the players arrive. We had to make sure that everything was good to go. Then we might adapt little bits on feeling. So if the players feel really overloaded, it might be okay. We have a bigger gap between meetings. We do 2-3 small ones, or we do 1 big one. We had to go a little bit off also feeling sometimes of the group, how they mental load as well as physical. So we've had those issues in terms of, you're always adapting. You're reading in the last campaign, you read some newspapers to find out information you're looking at opponent, you're finalizing opponent details of little tweaks on how we're going to play related to the opponent. The good thing is you get preparation time before the camps to do those. The problem is they adapt quite fast. So for example, especially in these times with COVID, players have dropped out last minute quite often and changes. Then after the first game, a team may have changed coach or changed system. So you've got, say you play Wednesday, you would then be playing again on the Saturday.
Yeah.
So the Thursday you would have a post-match meeting, all individual content to be available. You have to watch the opponent game, code that, clip it, put it in the team meeting, maybe do animation drawings. So it's bang, 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 bang.
Yeah.
So they're intensive, but because it's valued and it's being well used, and it's a key part of our process, and our coaches really heavily believe in it, and the players are inquisitive, it makes it enjoyable.
Yeah.
So you don't.
There's a reward for you. You never had the feeling that you're not doing it you're doing it for nothing. It is appreciated. It is used straight away. Yeah,
and it's, as we said at the start, it's coaching on the screen instead of the grass. So yeah, it's intensive, but you get that at clubs. I mean, I've experienced that at clubs before. I think we played 64, 65 games in a competitive season with United one year. And plus we had pre-season travel where I think we played Super Cup in Macedonia. We played 5 games in America. We played 1 in Oslo, actually, funnily enough, and 1 in Dublin. So you also get that at clubs. So it's probably a really tight, compact, extensive, intense schedule on national teams that clubs get throughout the season, maybe a little bit more intense, but those feelings, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. And so the let's say the build up towards a camp is relatively structured. I'm not saying it's not structured in the camp, but less intense. And then okay, once they hit the hotel floor or wherever you are, then my Champions League 3 days starts. That's kind of how it feels.
Exactly, and it's the time between camps. You get a lot more time to prepare. The strange thing is you're monitoring, maybe rather than monitoring 23, 24 players in your squad or 21 if some coaches like a smaller squad, you're then monitoring 55, 60, 65, 70 plus the whole league. Yeah. So you're monitoring more. And the difference is then we also try and make sure there's a lot of, as many national teams have, you're trying to build that consistency amongst age groups and understand. So it's a really different workflow club to national team. So it's also been a big learning curve for me, an adaptation period to get used to that. But it's there's still many aspects that are similar between club and national team.
By the way, if you can pull it's mainly the hood that I think is a little bit, well, I don't know.
I think I move around too much also.
No, that's fine with me. But it's more that you hear like this click. But when you move, it bounces, I think, against the hood. But whatever. We'll make it work. Okay. Yeah. So sorry, but a little bit distracted by that as well. But so so 60 players you have on your roster, potential players, and maybe you probably have 15 that are set, 20, 25 that are in your subgroup that could be there or could be not, and then you have your potentials. Mm-hmm. Is it that you follow them with a team, or is it you that you get the data and you make it presentable for the coach? How does the process go?
It's a mixture. We send out a schedule each month on where every player is playing, and who and where, and have that consistently. So that gets sent up to the coaching staff. And amongst us, we try and make sure that every player is seen over that week. Yeah. If we do that, it means we've got, again, it gives you that feeling of confidence of knowing where everybody's up to. We then take data as well with the players, and we'll do comparisons and some small studies on to see benchmarking and where they're up to and how that's progressed. But at the same time, trying to make sure it's focused and detailed, because it's also something that when the players are with the clubs, we allow them to focus on the clubs. Yeah. We don't send them a lot of detail and a lot of things because unless it's stuff that's requested, because they as players need to focus. They might have completely different principles in their club. Yeah. It's not right for us to be involved and so let them.
It's almost interfering with their daily process if you would communicate with them and send them different reports or whatever.
Yeah, let them perform. Yeah. Because if they perform better, ultimately it's better for us. Yeah. So and then as it builds up closer to the camp starting, we try and, again, where requested, what they need, give them stuff, but have everything ready to go. I have a saying to be bulletproof, so that if a coach or a player asks for something, I can be a step ahead where I go, yep, it's ready. There you go. This is what we're thinking. This is what we're working on. So.
Does that connect with, you were saying you went back home right before we pressed record? You said, I went home, but I found the time to meet some family, but it was also watching a lot of games.
Yeah.
Just because more and more players are playing in the UK as well. And it helps you again. The next time you see them, you can say, I was there in the stadium. I've seen these stats. I've literally was there. It makes you feel much more involved, or makes them feel that you are much more involved in their journey.
Yeah, and we try and do that because also there's certain things to pick up on live in the game. So how they communicate, the mannerisms, what they're doing, what the coach is asking them to do.
Yeah.
Because I think is a bit of a not an issue. An issue is the wrong word, but it's actually a big case in football of sometimes, especially scouting a player, we judge them on what we would like them to see rather than what their coach in the club is asking them to do. Now, if they're doing and following the instructions of the coach and performing at a high level, that's a better thing because it shows that one, they're playing well, two is they're coachable, and three is they're really part of building something in terms of a principle, so we know that what they're being asked to do is being successful. And also gives us that knowledge base of when you did this and this is really positive. And in other ways, ask them what were the coaches asking you to do? What's the principles of the club? And we understand the team that they're playing in as well, what they do. So it gives us a nice background. You see a lot of things on video. You see the majority of things on video, but there's also a way of that feeling and seeing and feeling the environment. Was it difficult for them to go and play in? So, and it helps build a relationship with the player. They know you're there if they need you. They see that you're taking an interest in them. It's a mixture of everything, I guess.
Yeah, got me thinking because you have these players coming from everywhere. They have 22 to maybe a little bit less, but 23 different playing styles that they work in a daily base. Mm-hmm. And then you as a coaching staff you also have an idea on how you maybe want to play, or you maybe have an identity as a country. Then it's interesting. Okay, we have all these players, bigger and bigger leagues involved in modern football. Are you going to fit your idea of playing on them, or are you looking, okay, this is the players we have, this is the principles and performances that they present to us every week? How can we bring them together and be the most successful team? What is leading in that question?
For us, the big thing was our clear principles. If we make sure that all our resources, all our video, all our data, all our coaching on the grass, the way we're working is clear, and we communicate clearly, and we build that over camp by camp, then we can build in the way that we feel is best to play with this group of players. And that's been consistent throughout. And now that we're still adaptable in systems, but it might be the overall principles are clear. So when the players know, okay, it's back into this. And we have principles videos and playing style videos that we can remind players at the start of each camp, this is how we work, this is what we do, and it switches them on again.
Okay, so the adaptability, of course there's adaptability from the staff, but you're asking as well for the players, okay, in your club you're maybe doing this, you're a wing back, they expect you to go up and down the field 50 times, but here we want to, our principle, for example, is to be having a little bit more balance in defense, whatever. Mm-hmm. You have to adapt to this system right now when you are here. That's what I hear.
Yeah, and it builds up over time. It's that thing of, I think if we compared the first couple of camps we had back over now into where we are 1 year later, I think the difference we would see in players automatically moving back into those traits when they come and join us, I think is much clearer. And I think that's a natural thing. It's almost like when you have pre-season and a new coach, a new season, and they have 3-4 weeks to work. If you think about, we maybe have 3-4, sometimes not even that, training sessions per camp. It's going to take 5-6 camps before you get that 3-4 week period of feeling. So I think that time almost, we have to work quickly to make sure that we can get that information into them as quick as possible, but it's only natural that you'll get better over time in those things. So yeah, I think and we focused on that and try and keep those things, but also make the players adaptable, that if we need to change system in game, we can keep those principles, but it's just adapted and they know when they do this structure and this structure. So it's been in that sense, it's intense, but the players know that when they come, okay, this is how we work.
Yeah, it makes it very clear.
Yeah, there's not too much change all the time.
Yeah, and it's also, if I hear it, it's almost, there's no other way, because there's not enough time to rethink of course you guys have time in between to maybe rethink principles or playing style, whatever, but the players don't. They come in on Sunday, Wednesday they play. It all needs to be crystal clear.
Yeah, and I think there's that thing, obviously, that you look at all the coach, the Guardiolas, the Klopps, they have real clear beliefs and principles of how they play and the idea of getting better at what they do. but then they find small tweaks in things that they do, whether it might be a certain movement pattern with or without the ball, that they might add on and adapt, and over time you see adaptation. And I think it's no different to that. It's small tweaks, but at the same time, there's a core to it. There's core values to what we do.
Would that also, what would be the main thing for coaches to pick up on this? Because you're looking maybe a little bit from an analysis point of view, but you are right in there in the middle of the staff, and especially tactic wise, playing style, everything is there connected fully. But is being clear as a coach one of the most important traits to have?
I think so, because I think ultimately the players, if you're clear in your communication and you know the principles so strongly, the players believe in it more. And as soon as the players believe in it and there's more enthusiasm into it, the adaptation into learning and adapting that on the grass is quicker. So for me is a really big thing. I think communication, being clear, and also on national teams, if it's the same with clubs really, but because you don't get that time, you have to be in many ways even clearer, because you have to make the most of that 15-20 minutes tactical time you get, and the questions that come for it. Naturally, it seems you sit in meetings before and play, everybody clear, everybody okay, and the players go,
yeah. They don't want to be the player that says no.
Exactly. And then 1 hour later you get the question, or you get them the next day in the coaching in the session, they do it a little bit wrong maybe. And then you go, okay, but you're asked to do this. And the player goes, oh, and even though they're nodding, you still, it take 1 or 2 times. So, and this is the reason why we'd made those open feeling meetings, that not meetings of you go into them going, oh, we're going to get told we're doing wrong again and again and again. It's to make it so that they feel they can ask the question, or we can give them the information. Now, don't get me wrong. If the information is really important and they've done it, they've not quite got it 3-4 times, 2-3 times, it's one of them where we might go, hey, come on, you have to. But generally, we try and make it so it's a learning environment that it carries over whatever age the player is. They want to be there. It's not a meeting room to go and get battered.
That really changed, I think, right? Maybe even 10 years ago, the narrative of a meeting with players was sending from the coach, receiving and nodding for the players. That was the way coaching went down. But now it is changed. It's much more equal playing field, and coaches, and I think, especially maybe in the Western football culture, we tend to realize, okay, we have to do this together instead of sending it to the player. My feeling is that it really changed fast.
I agree. I agree completely. I think the big question that we tried to ask, and I've heard many coaches before, is how do you know what the players know? How do you know what the players understand? And it's ways of finding out. And I suppose it's like teaching. It's common sense that by getting at schools, you can get kids to do an exam. You can't ask the players to do an exam. Their exam is the game. Yeah. And 90 minutes, the game's over. You have to do something. So by having these creative ways in meetings of players to sometimes stand at the front and deliver themselves, or ask the questions themselves.
So even with the national team, the player you come to the tactics board, show me what your solution would be.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, great.
And I think that's the case of all our age group teams. It's I think it's important. I mean, at City's Academy, I was exposed to it quite quickly. Was players at under 12, 13 is coming up and presenting. Yeah. But it might be sometimes that the players they can get up now. We have the pitch on the floor in the meeting room. Yeah. And
this is not your room. It's the room of the group, so they can do whatever they think is right as well. It's not your rules, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes we found it where we got to the end of a team meeting and the players have gone, can we just have 10 minutes, players only? Yeah, no worries. Well, it's your room, as you say. So it's, and we've gone on a coffee, and 10, 15 minutes, sometimes 20 minutes later, the players have come out and gone in and feeling good, and maybe had big discussions, but at the same time then gone into the food and the meeting and taking a coffee. And it's football, I suppose. It's just talking about football like every day, like we are, but they're doing it. So it's nice that they feel it and talk about it amongst themselves also.
They take the ownership and they're not afraid. There's no boundary anymore to be involved.
No, and it's a good point, because it's a young group as well. So
what's the age? The average age?
I think is around 26.
Yeah.
For the squad, it was on the last camp. It was around 26, which I think was the youngest in Europe for the last two camps, other than Estonia and then England for the second one. But England was qualified then, so they played a lot younger players. So we still take that one. But
it doesn't count.
Yeah, but so we have a young group, I think. So we have many players that are the age. I mean, our captain is 22, and he's been playing senior football for 7 years now.
Yeah.
And then obviously we have several others where I think we have only one outfield player that's over the age of 30. So you start to look at it and go, okay, it's still many of them are either in the peak of their careers or not even anywhere near the peak age. So for them to take that responsibility and us to try and get that leadership side into them is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's also changing. It's changing for coaches, and in your case with your team as well. So you have coaches that started at 15, they're 35. They already have 19 years of experience. And in your case with your team, of course, you have several players, big players as well, that have been in a lot of dressing rooms and already have 6, 7 years, but they're still young guns. They're not even a full mature guy, you could almost say, but their experience in football is already very big.
I suppose that's a benefit of the league in many ways over here. That
the Norwegian league, you mean?
Yeah, because Scandinavian, similar to the Dutch and Belgian leagues as well, maybe, because you get players that get more opportunities at 16, 17 to play. That as much as maybe they haven't played at 19, 20, maybe they haven't played top level, Bundesliga, Premier League, apologies. They haven't played these levels, but they've played 3-4 years maybe already at 19. And they have those experiences of playing with maybe really senior players, and they learn things. So maybe it's a big thing that they get to 22, 23, and they've already had these experiences of playing a long time, that you can end up with, I try to think, maybe De Ligt playing for the Dutch at 17 I saw him leading the chanting with the Ajax fans when he's 17 years old after Champions League games. That's character. That's huge for leadership and these things. So, and maybe we have the same with Martin, with Ødegaard, because he's been playing in Real Madrid since he's 16 years old, playing in the league since he's 15. And now he's one example, but many others are only 22 and have been playing 3-4 years in our team. So I completely agree.
Yeah, and there's a difference in now. In Belgium, Spain already has it as well. That you see that the second teams are playing on the second level now more and more, especially with the elite clubs. Yeah. So these guys, let's say 16 to 21 talents, who wouldn't be chosen for the first team because of the first team needs to win, and we cannot take any risk by putting in young players, which you often see with the elite clubs as well. But these guys at that age, they're already playing men in those second leagues, and these opponents are playing to win. They don't care if you're 15, 16 or 18. They're going to batter you anyway, because it's their money and their win as well. It's a different and there you see that these talents are becoming mature almost on a football pitch, at least, very fast. So De Ligt played there, I think half a season before they moved him up, but also Frankie de Jong already played a year amongst men as a 17-year-old, which makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and I think the next point that comes from that is when's the best time for players to leave that environment? When, is it when they're 17, 18 and they have the big offer to go and play for, I don't know, Chelsea's under 23s and then loaned out? Yeah. Is it to go to Barcelona? Is it to go to Juventus at 18, 19 years old when you don't know if you're going to play? Or is it to do one extra year in Norway or go and take a step between and build gradually? I think a couple of examples maybe we have in Norway is, for example, Sanderberg, midfielder who went to Genk. He took the next step from Norway to Genk and then to the Premier League with Sheffield United. And now we have similar players on similar step. Christian Thorstvedt, who's 22 now, he's taken that step from Norwegian football to Genk again, funnily enough. And then what's his next step? Yeah, and you look at even with Erling Haaland, and you look at it now, okay, he went from Molde. So he went from his club to Molde, then Molde to Salzburg to Dortmund. Next, is it better to go step by step? Or if you believe you're good enough, Is it to go straight to the top, or if you're not sure and you want another extra year, is it better to stay where you are and play?
I'm thinking about the Spanish guy. I forgot his name. That went from Barcelona
Pedri.
to Croatia to experience a step, which is not a logical step. But if you hear your story, it is a logical step because he gets to move up to a higher league. I forgot his name. Olmo.
Oh, Danny Olmo. Yeah.
Yeah. And now he's at Red Bull, I think.
Leipzig.
Yeah.
And it's a question. I suppose the best way is to go, if you can do it, go straight to the top. No, it's great, but it doesn't work for many. You have to go straight into them, one of those top clubs, and play straight away is a big ask. So it's whoever makes those decisions has a lot of pressure on those decisions, because ultimately it can define the player's career. Because a lot of it also come down to luck with young players. And we talked about this as goalkeeper with goalkeepers recently. Was a case of, if you look at goalkeepers like, if I talk about England, Jordan Pickford, he played for Sunderland because they were in a real problem at the time, and started to play young players, and he got in the team and went through. You look, Jack Butland, who was the same. Birmingham had no money; they went down. They need a goalkeeper, and the experienced one, so he got the opportunity. If he'd have been at a big club, Birmingham is a big club, but if he'd have been at one of the top clubs, would he ever got the opportunity? Maybe he never had a career. And there's so many different circumstances in these decisions, I guess, with young players. So
for sure. Do you see, if you look at your daily work throughout the years, because you have a ridiculous amount of clubs with experience already, but do you see also that if you look at it at your daily analysis, that you see with younger players that the numbers that they produce, especially in those talented that move up fast, or that take those steps, that the numbers increase in intensity, that these statistics are not comparable anymore with 10 years ago? Is football changing fast as well?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to it, to probably benchmarking and data metrics with players, because there are so many variables in young players' football. For example, if I think about, let's say, for example, even a Man United under 18 game, and they can have their strongest team out in the Youth Cup and they can win 6-7-0. But the majority of the time, those players are playing with the under 23s normally in the league. So then to compare an under 18s team that's not got those players, that then playing against Manchester City or Tottenham or Chelsea the next week, even those numbers are really hard to benchmark. Quite often you do get players that stand out to a point, and you see some things in the control and the execution. And for example, it can be that with attacking players, you see higher quality numbers, and it relates back to decision making, if that makes sense. So they make better decisions, the best ones. So,
for example, they produce more key passes, or they produce more of those creative passes. Let's call it like that. Yeah,
and they don't ultimately end up always in assists, because maybe the quality of player they're playing with is different week to week. But so we try to look at, there's key things, but at the same time, measuring decisions. So if the execution is bad, as long as they're making the right decision and then they go work on the technical aspect, it's a better thing for benchmarking, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I think you see in the best players at youth level, you see they make better decisions. But at the same time, it comes with also maturity. If you looked at Jude Bellingham, for example, when he was 15, 16 at Birmingham, now I haven't seen his data, but you would look at it and say, would he stand out on the data compared to... I don't definitely know that, because maybe Birmingham's under 16s, under 18s weren't able to compete with the elite clubs. So
maybe they weren't even dominant on the pitch. So they were more in a defensive style play, which says nothing about his quality if you look at statistics.
And I guess that's where you have to combine, and it's a clear example of combining statistics with video, with live scouting, with knowing the player and developing the player. It's I think to make decisions off players using data at young age groups is quite difficult, because there are so many more variables. And if you compare that with using data at a senior level, And at under 21 level, for example, you get those consistent metrics because the quality is normally quite consistent game to game, week to week, in terms of, say, if I looked at a national team, for example. But then to compare our under 17 players with our A squad players in such different asks, the different outcomes, different playing style, principles a little bit, is really hard to benchmark. Yeah. And you have to be really careful with it, that it's used as the data is used as an indicator rather than a decision maker, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it can be useful. It can be really useful in that sense. And we use it to look at progression. So rather than comparing a player with another player, it's comparing a player to their former self to try and see, is there any differences that we're noticing in his game as he moves through? And what differences should we see? If there's anything to the side of what we should see, okay, maybe then it's a trigger for us to look at something. I think that's how we work with the data. And I'm not sure. It's hard to say that would you identify something that there's a big difference between the elite ones and youth ones, because ultimately it depends on the players they're surrounded by. I remember Scott Sellers when he was head of coaching at City when I was there. Ultimately, his view was if we can add one or two real high bits of quality to each age group each year, better players get better playing with better players. It's hard to say, but it's true. If good players play with good players, you develop them more. So it was about adding those bits to it and making sure you had an elite group. And I wonder, maybe I asked the question, is that why you get golden generations?
Because they push each other.
Yeah, all the way through.
Yeah. I think it's completely true. Even within clubs, but also within nations, because you hear these stories that, okay, we grew up and we played each other 4 or 5 times a year, and every time that was the big moment, and then they see each other at the national team, which pushes them. You also, I think, if I connect, you also hear that those, but maybe I'm going off topic now, but it got me thinking straight away that these top players always off the pitch always also connect. So you have, let's say, City top 3 players of a U15. They know the top 3 players of United for sure, and maybe they are friends because they know these are the guys that I can relate to. And that if you have that within a club and you have not 3 but 5, these guys are going to batter each other to become the best every session, and the rest has to go. Otherwise, they will never. Otherwise, the gap is too big.
Yeah, and I think there's aspects of that now with you look at teams like Chelsea who've had they had the 3-4 come through when Frank Lampard took over, and obviously have moved on as well with people like Reece James, Mason Mount. These guys have that connection, and then if you have good people also around them and good players, then naturally I think it's going to grow. And I think that's maybe, you would say that the smaller nations don't necessarily have a big advantage because they don't have a big pool to select from normally. But actually, one of the advantages they do have is quite often they've known each other since they were 14, 15. And whether that be Belgium, whether that be Norway, Denmark, Netherlands.
You're not specifically saying Netherlands because you think they're already a bigger country.
They're already doing okay for quite a long time. So it's slightly different. But it's true. They played together all the way through.
Yeah.
So maybe that's
Iceland is the best example of this story ever.
Yeah, it's true because
they are hardly a city or hardly a nation, but they still produce a team. I'm not even saying that they're producing world class players, but they're producing a team that can compete.
And got to a major tournament, which so many teams have struggled to do over the years. Croatia is another one. Yeah. Croatia is a good nation, but it's not a huge nation. And yet consistently they develop player after player that plays in the top leagues. Yeah. And is it because they have this thing since being young players all the way through?
Yeah, we had last week we had an interesting discussion with Andrew Findlay, who is a sports director for Hajduk Split. But there we had an interesting discussion about nature and nurture as well, because these countries have different problems and they create different type of players. Norway is a pretty sophisticated country. There's not a lot of problems, real life problems in Norway. Mm-hmm. But in countries like Croatia or smaller countries, these kids literally have to fight to get somewhere, which they bring to the pitch as well. So different aspect, but it's also a part of the success, I think.
No, I agree.
It's a completely different discussion.
No, but It's football. It's discussing football and why it happens, I guess. So
yeah. So that it brings out the best. And if you look, if we're talking about Iceland or Norway, if you have a small group and they feel that they have to compete with each other, and there's a true team there, and you have these 3-4, well, in your case, superstars that are going to push, that know what the level is at the elite, because other players maybe didn't experience that yet. Then it's gonna be. It's with Portugal. It's the same. Ronaldo pushes the level in the dressing rooms to a unique levels, and then everybody joins in. It's not a coincidence that they perform at such a high level every time.
Yeah, and then they bring one or two with them each time, and then all of a sudden you have a strong group together that becomes more and more elite. So then the big thing is staying there, making sure they keep coming and coming and coming and coming. So hopefully we do that.
Yeah, well, I hope for you too as well. Yeah, yeah. We already played each other anyway, so well, at least this sequel.
We don't talk about Rotterdam.
No. I'm not gonna say that. I promised myself not to do that. No, but it's interesting that I thought we were going to have a discussion about statistics, but it's more that you're part of the group and that you're helping the group and that you're providing them with information, and it all connects again in let's say these social dynamics that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And your role is, let's say boldly, is only providing the numbers and the green and orange and red colors. It's being superficial, but it all connects to the total team performance.
Yeah, I think that kind of sums up where analysis has become closer to the coaching group now.
Yeah.
It's using all the information we have to almost be one step ahead of the rest of the group, so that you know that if the coach might ask for something, is already there. So you're almost seeing the game in their eyes, how they would see it. And whether that is providing some, for example, if we talked about defending the box, and then I say, okay, we allowed them into the final third too much. They put in 14 balls into our box, say, but they actually won the first contact on 0. That's immediate data I can give relevant to say, actually, okay, that's an area we defended the box quite well, and let's look at the positions. But it might be, okay, then we need to look at the first pressure to see how did they get into our final third. So my job is to provide that kind of insight as well to go along. So it's linking that little bit of number work into the video work, into the coaching staff, into, okay, then what should we focus on? What should we present? What do we need to look at in the next session? So ultimately giving the information to the coaching staff to help us make the decision as a whole, and ultimately the head coach to make the final call.
And it makes your role also much more supporting instead of monitoring or controlling. So, hey, these are the stats. We did this wrong. No, these are the stats. How can we improve, or how can we do it the next time? That's a different approach as well. And I think that narrative shifted also in recent years, that because you're much closer to the staff, you're not the guy, you're not the numbers guy. No, you're the guy that helps the playing style, helps the players get better.
And that should be it, because I said the video and the results, you can't play the game back again on the grass, but you can play it back again on the screen and see different things. And even things that we use a lot of animation tools where it might be a case of, in one principle, one player is 3 meters out of position, but because he's the only one that's 3 meters out of position, it means they can play through us.
Yeah.
Or it might mean that the first pressure hasn't quite been right. So if we can move them on the pitch to where they should have been, rather than saying you should have been here, we can go, okay, this is where your position should have been, and the player moves into position. It's a visual for them also. So it's an education football process, really, for them. And making it real life a little bit rather than theory. It's not a case of theory. It's the reason why we want you to do this is because otherwise he plays this pass. And then we have to defend as a forward, defend the box. And really, you want to defend as far away from the goal. I think that's the one similar thing for every team is everybody wants to defend as far away from the goal. It's not possible, and sometimes you can't, but it's natural. You want to be as close to their goal as you can all the time.
Yeah, interesting. Great. How do you find time for yourself between all these, Champions League moments and preparation time? Because it kind of demands that you are up to date on new features, new variables, or whatever. How does that go for yourself? Is it in the evening again behind the laptop and looking for new things, or how does this process go for you?
It becomes a bit of an addiction.
Yeah.
So I would say I'm quite lucky that my job is a hobby.
Yeah.
And I think that's the dream for most. I'm very lucky. But
is it, like we said before, is your life. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not a job. It's just your life. Your life is this.
It's a good way of putting it. Actually, it's a lifestyle. But then that's the thing, because for example, you can put the laptop to one side, but then what would you do? Okay, then Chelsea Tottenham is on last night, so you watch it, and you're picking up small things, and you see Chelsea adapt the system and things like this, and so naturally it happens, and you try and get time away from it, and it's whether it's going for a run or something like that, or some family time. But at the same time, my family loves football.
Okay.
So it's Boxing Day in England, the 26th is okay. Christmas is finished. It's football now.
Yeah.
Okay, which is great. So again, that's why I've been brought up with that. But you try and go for a run, but then the same thing we talk about is podcasts.
Yeah.
You know what it's like.
Yeah.
It's so you sometimes I think you try and get away from it actually, but because you love it so much, you get drawn back to it.
Yeah.
And people can.
The wife doesn't love football. It's the only way that you get you out of football. Maybe no.
And then after a few weeks, you say automatically,
"Oh, so this is not going to work out."
Yeah, and then you're okay, single again. But yeah, you try and find a balance. It's not always easy. I think it's something you get better at. But it's if you love it, then
if you love it, you live it. In this case, literally.
Yeah, and you can get some crazy questions from people. I remember as a kid at school, I couldn't remember anything, and I was a bit mischievous and things.
Yeah.
But then if someone asked me who sponsored Sheffield Wednesday, or who sponsored Nottingham Forest, what squad number was Steve Stone in Nottingham Forest, then, for example, or these players, or Peter Van Hooijdonk, something like that.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember those at school, but I couldn't remember anything. But it's because you're in it. You're already, it's everything, and it's not changed. So I ended up with quite a crazy knowledge of Gibraltar football recently, and obviously from the group, as I'm sure that the analysts and the rest of them do. It's just lifestyle. It's lifestyle.
Yeah, and I can imagine that you also you know a lot of other analysts, and you push each other also to new directions. You know, if you've seen this statistics, or I've connected these dots, and then you're gonna look into it yourself, and that's the data maniac in you that finds those new things, probably.
Yeah, and even small things. I mean, even an analyst from another country recently called to say, "What headsets do you use in the games? I need new headset," and it to communicate with the bench, and even small things like that. Because at the end of the day, you work with technology, and as you know, you don't want any technical issues when something's going on, like me moving the mic.
Yeah.
So. Exactly. You want the best quality of everything. So yeah, ultimately we're all in the same position. It's how you work with the information you have. Yeah. And not sharing too much is the most important thing.
Yeah. I can imagine. Okay, so it's your off time is almost on time. It's for every coach, I think, the same.
Yeah.
If for coach or performance, whatever, if you are addicted is a negative word, but it's literally that you cannot think of anything else. It's I have the same thing. Sometimes I feel myself sitting on the breakfast table with two kids screaming for me, and I'm in a different place, because you're thinking about whatever you think is ready. And sometimes it's okay, I want to create this, or I want to talk to that guy, or that was a good idea, I heard somewhere there. And that's with you, probably the same, and more in your field. But when I was coaching as well, I was with my family. I thought, okay, if I tried to place the left winger maybe 10, 15 meters more on the inside, what would happen then? And then that whatever, it would go by me straight away. And sorry, I'm here with the family. It's 100% connection with what you do every moment almost.
I agree. I think even the fact that you ask probably majority of coaches and players that in June, if they're not with the national team, will they watch the Nations League games when they're supposed to be off? They will. Yeah. And then they'll watch anything else that's on. No, we're lucky. The Norwegian league goes from the first week of April through to end of November, so we actually have the season throughout the whole time.
Yeah.
But and then you get to the World Cup in November. That everybody that's on a winter break that's not at the World Cup will watch the tournament, no doubt. So I think it's the same for everybody in football. Obviously, you get some exceptional circumstances where they don't like football; they're just really good at it. Some players that can happen, but I think in terms of everybody else involved in it, I think it's whether it's media, whether it's journalism, whether it's players, staff, coaches. I think,
and it is in the end. But I think you can recognize it as well. It is good to switch off once in a while. You need to, otherwise you literally go crazy. So
I agree.
It's just putting yourself maybe into a severe workout that you cannot think about anything else or whatever that breaks your attention. You need to do it once in a while. And I was joking about my family, but these are the most important things ever. So I need to switch off and switch on to them. Otherwise, you literally go nuts.
Yeah.
And then you forget things like sleep and whatever, which I can imagine in your case is also maybe a little bit of a danger.
Yeah.
But
in camp it is. Outside of camp is okay. Normally it's we can work with that, but yeah, it's going to the gym instead and realizing you're not as strong as you were is the frustrating bit, and that's when you switch off from football.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's very recognizable as well. Okay, so I've asked you before we started. Okay, is there any time for you to read in between? What do you read then?
As one thing, actually, whether it's podcasts, as I say, or it's books. When I was younger, I was a big fan of. I used to read all autobiographies and biographies on coaches, players, staff, and there's kind of three books that stand out a little bit. 2 I've read and 1 that I need to read, but I've been told about.
Yeah.
The first one is that I've read is The Immortals, and it's by Arrigo Sacchi, and then a journalist that covered AC Milan in the successful years.
Yeah.
It basically talk about Arrigo Sacchi in terms of how he played, his pressing structure, and I think there's a lot of coaches that have pointed to him in the past as being someone quite inspiring, and the successful periods he had. So that was a really interesting one. You said before about analysis and how it's modern now, but actually coaching methods that maybe people that started to be quite forward thinking, and people talk about Arsene Wenger and Bielsa, and I think Arrigo Sacchi is a big one. It's a very good book, and obviously covers his journey before he goes into the Italy coaching team 91-96. So that's one. A funny one is, but it's interesting, I think, for everybody that loves football, is called "Do You Speak Football?" and it's by a guy called Tom Williams.
Okay.
And it's basically is a background on all different, like, for example, you would say in the top bin or the back of the onion bag in England to say to score.
Yeah.
So it's all different sayings from around the world of what they mean. And it's quite funny. So that if you go to a new country and you hear a commentary or something and they say it, you understand what they're meaning because it's a funny phrase from that country. So it's quite a creative one.
So it's funny, but it also can be a little bit useful as well if you listen to other coaches talk. Okay, what do they mean?
Yeah, exactly. And even with podcasts and things. So that was a good one. And the third one is almost a follow up to Moneyball. It's called Astro Ball.
Astro Ball.
Yeah, and it's by Ben Reiter.
Okay.
And it's called The New Way to Win It All. And it's about basically this guy, Ben Reiter, predicted, I think in 2014, that the Astros would win the World Series in baseball in 2017, 3 years, and they were one of the worst teams in the league. But they brought in, it's one that relates a little bit to data, and it's just interesting. And it's a bit the Moneyball theory, but what they did is they combined the data with old-fashioned gut feeling of coaches and scouts.
So they took the comparison of the jaw. Okay, this guy has good jaw with real data, and they took it to the next step. Is that what you're saying? Effectively,
yeah. And so this is the one that I need to read because it's interesting because it's that combining the two together. But it's talking about I think they got like a rocket scientist in as the data analyst.
Okay, cool.
But then they had the old-fashioned gut feeling scouts and coaches. So it's one that got recommended to me, and it's the fact that it was on the front of the newspaper in 2014 in the US, I think it was, but in 2017, and he said this would happen, and in 2017 it happened.
Great.
So it's a bit of a story of how. So it's one that rather than I need to, but the other two are very, very good for one a little bit lighthearted and the other on inspiring football, coach forward thinking.
But with the last book, isn't that also the essence of your work? That gut feeling can be supported by data, and data supports the gut feeling. That's
I guess that's the dream.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you compare things like baseball and NFL and these things back to football, and you talk about everything is a set play, is a set piece in those areas. So you can focus and narrow it down because you don't have so many variables. And then you go into an open play sport and it becomes much more difficult.
Yeah.
And I was actually listening to the radio the other night, and they had a phone in, and they said, what is if you were to start from scratch now and pick up one sport that you think in 5 years you could become world class at, what would you pick? And it's the one that you take everything out of. There's nothing affects what you do. It's only your skill. No opponent affects it. And I think the two they came up with was tenpin bowling and darts.
Okay.
Because no matter if you perform your highest level, nothing affects it. So my point being is, at what point on the spectrum of things that can be affected to not affected to being completely open play, can you have this approach of purely make decisions off data to gut feeling and adaptation? So this is why I find this book interesting, because to read next.
Yeah, it's a nice combination. Yeah. Okay, great.
So it's the geek part in me coming out now.
Well, then we should go on a little bit longer. Then we'll see what comes out when you dig deeper. No, okay. Yeah, I love that because it really connects, because if you connect it with football, then there's also a place for creativity, and there's a place for these players that do things that nobody can think of. There's also a place for crazy players that have these maybe hard personalities that you don't. And if you look at their data, he makes a lot of mistakes, but this is also the guy that creates that one thing that can decide everything. And if you would look at his data, you would say, yeah, this is not consistent or whatever. But you need those guys that break the consistency or break the rules.
Yeah, and it's that old-fashioned question of you have a player that 90% of the time is not applying themselves into the principles of the team and what they're doing, but at the same time he can be the match winner.
Yeah.
So do you play him or do you not play him? Do you use him as a sub?
Yeah.
How do you work it if you have this maverick top player, but then you have the player that gives everything and get you through the game and is consistent, applies themselves, does everything right, but doesn't quite have that X factor?
Yeah.
Which is more valuable to your environment, your team, I don't know the word, what you need, your beliefs.
Yeah.
Or do you need both? And actually the first one gets you through 60 minutes and the other one comes on and wins you the game for 30 minutes. But then will he go crazy? And then what would the data say about that? The data would say he's the match winner. If you compared his execution conversion rate to his XG or his expected opportunity, this guy is the top level. But if you compared the other guy's data, he wouldn't stand out in data. But maybe he's the most important player to the coach. I remember we had, when I was at Wolves, just as one example of how we worked that with, for example, scouting was and looking at data. We played 3-4-3, and the centre back is Conor Cody, who plays for England. He people talk about normally a centre back. Okay, maybe you need to be 190 tall, 188, 190. You need to be big, strong, quick, over the ground. Okay, and Conor was a midfielder. He actually was playing right back the season before, and then I don't know how big he is. He's maybe 186, something like this, and we looked at 5 games. It was overall, we had all the data for the whole season. In 3 of the 5 games, and I think 2 of them were against Man United and Tottenham, he actually didn't have an aerial duel or make any header in the game.
Yeah,
I think we won both, maybe, if not won and drew one. Need to check. But how can the middle centre-back in a back 3 against those 2 teams not have an aerial duel or a header in England?
In England, which is important as well.
So then... But then if you think about the principles that actually their job is to cover, not like an old-fashioned sweeper, but a little bit because... And the other 2 were to be aggressive and come out of the space to defend. then actually maybe that player doesn't need to be a centre-back. Maybe it can be a midfielder. Maybe it can be someone that reads the game well, anticipates, cover decent movement to cover.
It creates the confidence for the other two guys to break the opponent, and because he's always there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then you put that into the scout department, and you say, okay, this is our beliefs, this is how we play, this is what we work. But actually, when you look at a centre-back, you don't need to think about these qualities all the time. Actually, maybe it opens up another group of players to look at that other teams wouldn't look at. And maybe that's how you get the gem. Maybe that's how you get that player that other teams didn't take for €6 million instead of 60 million euros.
Yeah.
So the way that we tried to connect the analysis of the team to the scouting was to make it, what do we actually need? And so that's kind of the example that relates to that. And I guess it comes back to the Astro Ball thing of finding the players you really do need and the gut feeling on them, can they do it? So another aspect all linked together. I talk too much.
We can dive into so many aspects, but it's interesting. And sometimes it's also luck that you don't have the player. So, okay, let's drop with the one midfielder because we don't have anybody else. And then you find or you discover that it works. And then maybe that's the way he ended up there even. And then you find, okay, this would actually work, and it would work even better than the original situation.
Yeah. I suppose there's so many examples of players that have adapted position over so many years across all countries and areas. And maybe that data wasn't available to back that up initially, but now it is. But yeah. And it's the old, again, another one talking about principles of what position should a player play when he's a kid? What age do you focus them? Or actually, do you never focus them? Do you get them to learn different positions and what's required so that they can adapt?
Yeah.
Because you never know. At what age does a player become not adaptable anymore? For me, it should be they're always adaptable.
Yeah.
Apart from maybe a goalkeeper to a striker.
No, but it's completely... You said you watched Tottenham play Chelsea yesterday evening. And I just read, I didn't see the game, but I just read they played Ziyech as a wingback while he was a creative number 10. I didn't see the game, so I don't know if it's hard or true, but so he adapts as well. He has to play 30 meters back instead of being the creative guy and didn't defend. So yeah, you have to be adaptable at any time.
And then you start talking about principles that actually, if one of the fullbacks stays inside, and the wide player holds his width. At what point does it look like a 3, and what point does it look like a 4?
Yeah.
And then is it 2 systems in and out of possession? Is it 4 systems if you have a system when you're in a high block to a low block? So I've read some stuff on this before. Is at what point does a system just become its numbers?
Yeah.
When really it's about patterns.
Great.
Because you could go back and then look at the game and see how many times it looked like Ziyech is in a wide position, how often it looked like the centre-back is in a 3. It's so flexible, fluid and versatile now. And I think that's the way football is.
Yeah, when I was really working with the first team, the only moment that you use those numbers is so you have a starting point.
Yeah.
That's the only, because that's the only time on the board that you will use it literally in that shape, because on the pitch, it will never be that situation ever. It's just a starting point for your explanation. And we happen to connect numbers with it. And that's it. Because if you have, you already said it yourself, if somebody dribbles in 10 meters, it's already 2, 5, whatever it is, what it is at that point, and how do you adapt to that?
Yeah. Like when you talk about 4-2-3-1, and normally 4-2-3-1s without the ball often become 4-4-2 because of the first pressure triggers.
Yeah.
And the same as when it's 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3 is quite often flexible. I mean, even you look at the Dutch team and with how many systems that they end up playing in a game. If Frenkie de Jong drops, if David Klaassen stays high and Wijnaldum drops to the side, it's 4-2-3-1. But a minute ago, it would look like a 3.
Yeah.
It changes so much so easy, and going back to the original point, players need to be adaptable in that case.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Okay, we should do this again, Andrew, because if we go into these things, we can go for another hour. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, never stop talking. Football never ends, huh?
No, in this case, well, especially if you go down this rabbit hole.
It's a big hole as well.
Yeah, this is a big rabbit hole with a lot of systems. If I sometimes I go on the internet and I see so much details on, especially on Twitter and these systems, you can, this is the never-ending rabbit hole. Never.
Yeah, it's something that I think is only going to get worse and worse as well, because it's going to get more detailed. There's so much more you look at. There's more data available. There's more analysis available.
Yeah.
Analysts are becoming more specialist, as we spoke about. So
yeah,
I think it will go on and on and on.
Yeah, interesting. What I reminded you, we were starting about penalties. I actually did the research when I studied human movement science and penalties. I should send it to you.
Yeah.
We discovered how, what process, also a little bit psychological approach on what variables could we find that would increase the performance during a penalty shootout. I'll send it to you for sure. I don't even know if I have a digital version yet. I don't think I don't have it anymore, but I have a paper version. But it was related to time, and it was related to the behavior of the goalkeeper. So that was, I think, 15 years ago. So that's when my analysis started. So
on pen or paper or on a computer?
No, it was literally, it was funny. We had a TV screen. We had digital video. So we had all the penalty shootouts from 1970 until then, which was not the penalties throughout the game, but in the shootout at the end of the game. Or when it had to decide the game, I think you understand. And then we just, with pen and paper, or in Excel, I think we analyzed all the movements, but we literally went with a stopwatch or with a timer. We pressed the time, and then as soon as one player kicked the ball, the new time starts until he kicked the ball. So until he shot the ball. So that was the total time of a whole sequence. So walking from the middle line to the penalty spot, taking the ball, putting it down until he shot. Then the time stopped and the new time started again. Interesting.
That's also a big rabbit hole. Because
that's also a rabbit hole. Yeah, we found like 20 variables, and the hard thing was that it was fundamental research, that you had to find, like, say, these significant data. Okay, what is significantly, according to science, improves or maybe decreases the performance. But in football, 0.5% makes the difference, not a significant data. So that was interesting as well. So we found these things that were gut feeling based on a few data points were interesting. But yeah, the professor said, this is not applicable because it's not significant difference. Okay, well, it doesn't. But it was interesting things that we found. So one of the things was, as a goalkeeper, you should interfere the process as much as possible.
I saw someone talked about it recently. I can't remember where I saw it. And there was a study on, I think it was a penalty shootout, maybe from the Euros. And they said, if when you score, if you celebrated with your arms in the air and really aggressive and lifted, that team is more likely to win. Okay. If you looked at the data, so I can't remember where I saw it. I'll see if I can find it. And it was something like this, and actually related to that physical emotion and strength of showing the celebration. But there's so many things, because the myths came out of, you hear the commentator say, it's a short run up, I never liked it. But actually, do we know that the short run up hasn't got a bigger success rate than the longer run up? These kind of things. And you don't, it never gets questioned when a player takes a 1-step, 2-step run up to a free kick or even a goal kick for a goalkeeper to strike the ball longer. It's so many questions you can answer. That's a big study. That's a huge
rabbit holes as well.
Everywhere. Yeah. And this is, but going back to what we said at the start of the conversation, analysis doesn't end. It can go on and on and on and on. You can analyze and you can coach and coach and coach, because you never get a perfect performance, right? Until you get the perfect one, then maybe it will happen. But I don't think that's ever happening.
Because then somebody will break your strategy or find something to interfere with it again. Yeah.
So it will always continue. So then we've got a lot of rabbit holes to get through.
Wow, this rabbit, we found rabbits, and now they all dig a hole. So yeah, it was funny. Okay, who should we talk to next, Andrew?
So got two for you, but it depends which line you want to go down.
Which rabbit hole I want to go down.
Yeah. So one person is a guy called Bradley Wall, who actually is a guy who's in charge of all domestic scouting in Wolverhampton Wanderers now.
Great.
But his past is he's been the analyst for Steven Gerrard. In Rangers. He's worked with England's youth teams as the analyst. And he's got a very good recruitment background also, but he's also got a lot of big contacts and a lot of experience with teams like Liverpool and Everton as well. Really good knowledge base and good at linking everything together. And has worked with some of the senior coaches in English football, and also some top players that have come through and are now some of England's young senior players. So. And then the other one, depending if you want a different route, is a guy who's previously has just been the head of medical at LA Galaxy. Cool. Philip Haywood, who I work with again at Wolves. He is working with, again, England's youth teams now as one of the lead medical. And just in terms of, he's worked with a lot of young players and a lot of coaches over the years, of different levels, from people like Paul Lambert through to Nuno Espirito Santo. He's worked in the MLS, and has worked in a kind of Spanish environment culture. So where going from young players coming through and working. So I think it's two names of, I don't know what aspect you want to go down, but I think it's two good people with good experience of working with elite young players.
Yeah, great. So let's try to follow up with both of them and see would connect the best, but I think it's both of them. It's interesting. We never had really a medical approach, so that would be interesting as well. But scouting and analyzing is, well, I think you are the first analyst, the real Oh, am I calling you a real analyst? Yeah, I'm calling you a real analyst. You are the first real analyst.
Nice to be called a real analyst. I've been called a lot worse.
I'm looking for the right word. Sorry, but no, because I was thinking about a performance coach, and we all had different roles so far. But only like the analysis part, you are the first one. So we should keep that alive as well. So we can go both ways. Great.
Yeah, I think then Brad is a good guy to lead you back onto the coaching path after that, if you wanted to go that way.
That's true.
He's good contact, really good knowledge base. So I think it's a good one. And then Phil, if you want the medical perspective. Two really good guys.
Great.
Really open.
Okay. Well, hopefully they hear your podcast, feel a little bit of pressure, and then we can call them.
Yeah, or they hear mine and think I can do so much better. So then they think that one can be that also.
Well, then we'll see. We'll talk to them. We'll see what they say. Okay, Andrew, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining the coaching room, and keep in touch and speak soon.
No problem. It was a pleasure. See you.
Bye, guys. Bye.